a second. We may even be live now.
What?
Our professionalism is showing.
It's crazy. I'm going to fire the producer. Definitely firing.
We're hearing your music a little delayed.
My music?
Yes.
Your music a little delayed.
Yeah, you've got some speakers.
I have this on YouTube?
Music a little delayed.
What?
Yeah, you've
That's
got some
so unprofessional.
Something.
Mother effer. Who does
We are
that?
professionals here. If you guys want to know how the sausage is made, just watch this show because we're winging this whole damn thing.
It's so ugly. I'd like to apologize for, first of all, I'd like to welcome all of our viewers to the Punch Up Pod.
Punching Pad Pod.
Punching.
Sponsored by a guy from Miami.
Yeah. With Lila and Pat. Hi, welcome to our second live show. Second show of the day. This has been a day. So thank you all for tuning in and joining us. My lighting is effed. So I'm sorry about that. Pat's isn't great either.
This is all such a work in progress. We're switching platforms next week to StreamYard or StreamYard. I don't know, whichever that is.
Yard stream.
Because no matter what we do in my screen right now, I'm in black and white, even though I don't know what it looks like on air. And then we got the green screen effect, which fades in and out, and I disappear sometimes.
It does that with my chest.
Yeah, we're a mess. But
Crazy.
thank you for joining our mess.
Truly a mess. But yes, thank you for joining us. We have a lot to cover. We have a special guest who will be joining us, I think, in about half an hour. Shahid Buttar will be coming on. We are really excited. There's a lot to talk about with him. But because of that and because of, time constraints, we want to, I think, jump right into our segments, or do we want to just shoot the shit for a second and ease into it? There's
so many jokes there. No, I just want to say, first off, cheers to the people, anyone here. Thank you for joining us and being patient with our progress as we learn how to podcast. Grifting isn't easy. It takes some work.
There's so much work to the grift.
Right. But also I want to say thank you to the Vanguard pod. Love those guys. Yeah. They're fantastic. We were on there earlier at 2.
That was really fun.
I think ideologically we all are sort of in the same wheelhouse as hardcore progressives, but how we reach our goals, I think we tend to all agree more than a lot of other people that I don't consider enemies. You could disagree with me on this strategy.
I think the most important thing is just to cancel anybody you don't agree with 100%. I feel like if we've learned anything from these last several months, it's cancel away.
Yeah, one tweet. You get maybe one tweet as a pass, but after that, you're done.
I'm waiting for all the hate mail to come in, calling me a self-hating Jew for saying I had the map of Israel on my face, and I just want to say I welcome your hatred.
Well, it'd be one thing if I had said it, because I see it, but I don't talk about it. I don't talk about it.
Now you're crossing the line, my friend. You're crossing.
I'm trying. I want to draw all the heat off of you because you're a very nice person, and I'm sometimes nice, but I don't mind dealing with the bullshit.
You're plenty nice. I'm looking through. My pages seem to be in or out of order, which is frustrating. But anyway, yes. Thank you to the Vanguard. That was really fun. The Vanguard guys. We had a great time. So thank you for having us on. I think we better just jump into Who Said It, Red or Blue. Do you want to talk about the news? Do you want to talk about the infrastructure plan? Do you want to circle back and say, hi? Yeah, no, tell me.
Yeah, I think because we have a guest coming on sort of mid-show, maybe we just jump into our first segment. And that way people know we're professional with these graphics here. So here we go.
Okay. So,
so pretty much every week we're going to have a quote, and you'll have to figure out who said it, which is sometimes not going to be rocket science. If you're a Twitter, if you live on Twitter and don't touch grass, as they like to say.
Yeah.
But here we go. That's the wrong segment. So here.
That's good. That's good. I think you should join the union on that one.
Right.
Yeah.
So here's the quote of the week. You want to read it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There we go. I'm a big fan of vaccines, but damn, I am skeptical of one that's supposed to have been developed, tested, produced, and distributed in 6 months. There's some vaccine skepticism for you. What do you think about that, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I think if somebody said that now as a reason to not take the virus, as somebody that, I mean, take the vaccine, I would, it's a logical point, but I would push them to take the vaccine. I would argue about why they're wrong, why we need to
follow the science,
which says that the vaccine is safe and it was created in a way that wasn't really rushed if you look at some of the science. But this was a quote.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's crazy. That sounds like a big Trumper to me.
It does. Do we want to reveal who actually said it?
Yeah, let's see it. Reveal.
Here we go. Katie Hill, of all people.
Not a Trumper.
Staunch Republican.
So Katie Hill is a Democrat from California, and I'm just wondering if she was a lone voice. Our graphic is over that, but that was back in September of 2020. The lone Democratic voice that was, kind of casting some skepticism on the possible vaccination that was being developed.
Yeah, but she really wasn't alone. I mean, a lot of because this was being, Trump was the one who was going to be releasing the vaccine. We were told mixed messages completely by a lot of Democrats. And let's go on to the other quotes we pulled. Let's see, Biden seizing on worries of a rushed vaccine, warns that Trump can't be trusted.
So here's what I would like to say is that I don't trust Trump or anything about Trump at all. But there are ways to phrase it that don't cast doubts about the medicine and the science behind those vaccines. And instead, it was sort of pushed together, causing people, I think, to have a lot of worry about these vaccinations.
Right. I mean, it was just like the actual primaries. I mean, we were being told that it was unsafe to go out in groups by all the scientists, and we should, quarantine and stay home. But because the primaries were on and it was such a risk that Bernie could possibly win this damn thing, they were running with their lead, and Joe Biden and his campaign folks were all telling people to go out and vote in person in lines. And there were actual, it's not something that's immeasurable. A lot of people died by going to vote in the primaries.
They absolutely did. And when Bernie and his campaign were being cautious, they were accused by Biden's campaign of not, trying to destroy democracy. We've never postponed a primary. And then in New York, they were going to penalize Bernie if he won and take away some of his delegates. It was crazy. But so the science, it feels like, has always had a political tint to it, unfortunately. But at least it's just Biden.
Kamala. Would you believe Kamala Harris said something bad? So Kamala Harris says she won't take it if she won't say if she'll take the COVID vaccine approved under Trump. So, I mean, she's hedged her bets on every issue the whole time. I mean, she clearly was one of the worst people running for president. And despite all the propaganda around her, she was handily dismissed by the electorate.
That's right.
Most likely will be our nominee in 2024. So.
And, again, what this does is discredit the actual scientists who were working on the vaccination at the time. Like, yes, Trump is a liar. Trump might pull out stops to do something horrific. But they had to know that there were not that I'm giving a lot of credit to pharmaceutical companies necessarily, but there were independent bodies that were working on this, and the technology had been something that had been worked on and developed for decades, right? So they were casting a lot of doubt on this vaccination being developed under this ridiculous name, Operation Warp Speed, but it's what helped secure hundreds of millions of vaccinations and the development of vaccinations here in this country, and that was under Trump. Okay, sorry.
No, I hate giving Trump credit, and I don't really want to. But eventually, the biggest problem with Trump was not making the public message of the necessity to take the vaccine and the necessity to wear masks and
disputing to take this virus seriously, right?
Yeah, and disputing the actual science. And so the public was sold this narrative that Biden, unlike him, would listen to all the science. And what do we get? We get immediately when Biden takes over, we get, well, kids can be back in school under they could be within 3 feet instead of 5 feet, or whatever the measures were. But there was no science that really said it was safe to ever be at 3 feet. It was just that it was just as unsafe as being at 3 feet. So fuck it, you might as well, And the whole point of that is that you could open schools were not able to meet the requirements for the 5 feet, so they could not get 30 kids in a room and have them all 5 feet apart. But hey, if you had them at 2 feet apart, this is going to work. So magically that worked under Biden.
Yeah. There's been a lot of double speak. But okay, so we're talking about the vaccines right now and the skepticism, because as we all know, what's happening right now is we are calling this, or not we, but the administration is calling this a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And there is a lot of aspersions being cast on people who aren't getting vaccinated, because why would they at all be distrustful of a vaccination? And here's paid... So friend of the show.
The point is that it wasn't, when you see Brooklyn Dad say anything, that tells you that this is a narrative that the Democratic Party wants promoted. So his quote, do you want to read his quote? It's sort of off screen for me, but.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Kamala Harris isn't the only person who's leery of the vaccine Trump is trying to rush to market too soon. I won't be taking that shit until long after people stop dying from taking a faulty vaccine. So, I mean, he is paid by the DNC. This was coordinated with the Democratic establishment, right? He is piggybacking onto Kamala Harris, puts out her statement, and then he right away follows up with his statement. And again, casting enormous doubt on the science of the vaccine.
Yeah. And this is, what is that? September of last year. So, I mean, we were deep into the pandemic here. Yeah. This is not like something early on. I mean, when did the towards the end of the year was the first, I think, when people started getting
December, but it was like very few people were able to get it, but in December and then January. Yeah.
Right. So this is pre-election though, is the point.
That's right.
This is, and then immediately after, I mean, I don't know if we have the switch here yet. What else we got? Oh, here we got Joe Biden questioning the Trump administration process for approving a coronavirus vaccine while expressing broad confidence in vaccines and the scientists who create and vet them. I trust vaccines. I trust the scientists, but I don't trust Donald Trump.
I am not a Biden supporter or fan on any level, but I will say that to me, this is the most measured and understandable take, right? Like, but still, we're casting doubt on the vaccines and the timetable, but at least he's couching some of the I trust the vaccines and I trust the scientists, right?
Right, but it's also it's also him propagandizing people and spinning this narrative that he's going to trust the scientists. So if the scientists say something, that's going to be policy. Policy is based on science, but it's truly not based on science, is what we're finding out.
Yeah, definitely.
And I mean, there's some disturbing stuff. Like you and I were talking about this off air, but in other countries, they're saying that a lot of the hospitalizations are, a lot of the Delta variant hospitalizations are vaccinated people. Like one country is 60%.
One country, sorry.
No, I forget. So you could explain it, but one country was 60% of the people hospitalized were vaccinated already, and then one was 40% were vaccinated already. Our country says that the hospitalizations are at like a ridiculously low percentage of people who are vaccinated. So the narrative is just get vaccinated and then go live your life, and we're all good. But so why is our math so far off of these other countries?
I mean, it really makes you wonder what's happening, especially because we know that the CDC stopped tracing the virus in people who were vaccinated. So unless you were a serious case, they were not recording, and they wouldn't even test you if you had already been vaccinated. And what that's leaving out, of course, is, I mean, it's great if the vaccinations prevent, and I mean, we have yet to see, as you just said, that in other countries, they're finding that huge percentages of their hospitalized people are double vaccinated, fully vaccinated. But, you know, there's another, besides just like winding up dead or in the hospital and not there, you know, you can be passing on the virus, right? Like that's something that we're realizing from the studies done in other countries and from these breakthrough cases that are sort of being reported only anecdotally here, and yet they're growing the number of these cases and reports, but that people who are vaccinated are spreading it to other people.
Well, they absolutely are. And deaths is one metric when it comes to COVID, and we are hyper focused on that. But what's unmeasured so far is how many people are going to have lifelong issues based on just having gotten it. So sure, maybe let's believe their numbers that 99% of the deaths now are people who aren't vaccinated. Okay, but so how does that still affect the people that may be getting the Delta variant that are vaccinated? Do they have the risk of catching these long-term issues like lung scarring and who knows there's a lot of neurological stuff that we just don't know at this point. And so to open our kids up to that situation when they're clearly not vaccinated and we don't know the long-term effects of a lot of these things, it's just double speak. As soon as the election happened, everything changed. So now we don't have to ask those questions, and the media doesn't ask those questions.
Yeah. Right. And we'll get into it in a second, but this part of casting doubt on the vaccinations is really important because now, as we were just saying, the narrative is it's just a pandemic of the unvaccinated, and they're leaving out the, under 12s, the kids who they're not able to be vaccinated, and they are becoming the fastest rising population of people who are developing COVID. And as you said, long COVID, we don't know what the repercussions will be of that, 10, 20 years down the line of your organ failures. We just don't know.
Right. And I mean, I know people that have had COVID this entire time from when it was first a thing, that literally basically don't have a day. They get up and they struggle to stay awake, and then that's their day.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you said, like if the metric is just like, well, you don't wind up in a hospital or die, you're still not dealing with exactly this other category of long-term health deterioration that affects your whole life. Yeah.
But what is really important is that a couple billionaires launched their little dick missiles into space and hovered around the atmosphere, and Space Disneyland is open, folks. So if you have $55 million
heavily
or 26, if you want to do the low budget $26 million trip, you can do that with Bezos.
That's right. Yeah. So, okay. And I know we've got a couple other graphics just showing, there's Cuomo, who did his own like horrific take on handling COVID in his own state. I think he's personally responsible for at least 20 to 30,000 deaths because of, not letting de Blasio shut down shut down New York City. Also because of his
the nursing homes,
the deal with the nursing homes, right? No liability there. But he's saying this,
and just the fact that he is probably the worst example you could point to among Democrats, right? And yet he was the one literally given a platform daily to sort of be the anti-Trump representative of Democrats re-COVID. And here we are at the end of it. And he's the one who probably is responsible for the most deaths from the mishandling of this.
He wrote a book. Remember his poster glorifying himself? He got his own brother, who was the one who had him on daily, special treatment when Chris Cuomo got COVID. He got him to the front of the line to get tested and all of that. I mean, this is corruption at its core, right? You have your brother who has his own news show having you on every night to smooth things over with all your mishandling of the deaths during a global pandemic. I mean, yeah. And that's not even talking about all of, the sexual harassment suits and
right. So if you're a Republican and you watch CNN every day and you watch, you are rightly aggrieved that CNN is not being unbiased in their reporting when they gave him a platform every single day to come on and discuss the coronavirus. And it turns out he's one of the most vilifiable, if that's a word. But it's a clear case that he did so many things wrong in New York, and he was given a platform every day by the media. And then the media is just like, well, we're not going to touch that too much because it was a Cuomo story. It's related to our newscaster.
I mean, there's never accountability. Yeah.
So as a Republican, you have a right to look at that, and it's going to create more skepticism of trusting a source like CNN correctly,
exactly.
Which might be a theme tonight a little bit because we have a CNN clip later.
Yeah.
But
we got some stuff. Yeah. All right. What else do we have here? We got some more just to show how this all was being created by certain groups of establishment media personalities and politicians, right? There was a huge push to say that this vaccine could not be trusted.
Yeah, and this is FP. What is it?
Foreign Policy, I think, magazine. Yeah.
Fuck the people. I don't know.
Yeah, fuck the people. And then we have,
But yeah, so if it comes, I mean, it's just flat out. If it comes out before the election, don't trust it. I mean, it's just in writing right there. Like, don't trust it if it comes out before the election. And I mean, if you look at it, Biden largely kept Trump's COVID folks in place. So it's not like it wasn't a big, get rid of those people that were saying that stuff before the election.
No, they're all there. The scientists who developed the vaccine had nothing to do with Trump anyway. So all of this, vaccine mistrust was being created only on one side of the political spectrum. And so and I know we have a couple more, timetable. Yeah, I mean, CNN's getting in on it. Don't rush the vaccination. It's risky. This timetable is too short. So this was the push from the corporate Democratic establishment. Don't trust the vaccine under Trump. And the reason that, as Pat was saying, that this is so important is that now that Biden's there and this whole establishment and Wall Street and Big Pharma and everybody is a Biden supporter, now they're talking about how anybody who mistrusts the vaccine is a stupid Trump supporter. And, they spent quite a bit of time and money pushing the fact that they were concerned about a Trump vaccine. Well, now it's under Biden and there are people who are mistrustful. And the thing that, I don't even think, as I know you're going to show, that there's a study that came out recently. It isn't even just Trump supporters who are not getting vaccinated, right? I think the biggest group of people who are not getting vaccinated are Black Americans. And just 7 months ago, we all were told, Black voters are going to save us, right? Georgia, Black voters are going to save us. And now it was the one that you just showed. Sorry, I know I'm talking. Yeah, there. But I mean, that graphic is showing you 34% of Black people are vaccinated, which means 66%, is that my math? Are not. That's the highest percentage of any group that they profiled there that is not vaccinated. Maybe those are all Trump supporters, but that is not what we have been hearing for, years now. That's not how they show up to vote. So what are we casting in now? Yeah, like.
Well, I mean, there are millions of reasons inherent in the Black community for distrust in medicine. I mean, I think what's overplayed is Democrats and other people that want to spin a narrative. You know, they say it's all about historical treatment of Black people within the government. You know, the Tuskegee experiment, a lot of these things where the government was just evil, flat out evil. But what's missing from that argument is the distreatment. Like, you know, there's a distrust by the medical community. I mean, by Black people of the medical community, because like they've done studies saying, you know, when Black people go to their doctors, they're less likely to be believed about their pain levels. For example, they're less likely to be trusted that they need certain treatments, and that's real world stuff. You know, and you know, Black babies are 1 million times more likely to die than white babies from miscarriages. And I mean,
that's not a real statistic.
Not miscarriages, but
no, I saw 1 million times. I just don't want anybody to be like, it's not 1 million times, Pat.
Yeah, but
you're right. It's off the charts. The difference in the way they're treated,
real world things, and not just looking back. Because you know, in some ways, that narrative puts it on their community to get past something from the past, old grievance, and that ignores the current situation of how they're treated by the medical community.
And the mistrust isn't just of medicine, right? It's of our politicians, it's of our media, it's of big pharma. You know, you cannot just say, get over it. It's a global pandemic. Go get your shot. There have been decades, centuries of these institutions earning the distrust of the people who don't trust them right now. And so just to say, get over it is really not taking into consideration all the things that, you know, and I mean, sorry, but it always does come back to policy in the end. You know, if we had Medicare for All, if people could go see their general practitioners whenever they were in pain or just for well visits, they would have a different relationship with medicine and doctors. But they don't get that. And we have tens of millions of people in our country who are uninsured or underinsured. They don't have a relationship with a doctor they trust. That's something that we maybe, you know, should have had a little foresight there with, you know, all of the people who take money from big pharma and who say that they'll veto Medicare for All if it ever passes their desk. That's a problem, that we have such mistrust. And we would have more trust of medicine, of science, if there were more of an interaction.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at who, you know, we just showed clips of, I mean, the messages from Kamala Harris, the literal vice president who created some of this distrust within the Black community. I mean, if you're looking at her as a leader, you know, here she is right before the election saying, I won't tell you if I'm going to trust this thing. I'm not sure I'm going to take it. Right. And then Brooklyn Dad carrying out the message further. So, you know, and that none of these aren't gaffes or accidents. This is a, you know, when Brooklyn Dad tweets it, it's the narrative that they want spun to the public.
Exactly.
And they created intentionally a lot of this mistrust before the election.
Yeah. And you don't just spin on a dime. And, you know, there was somebody posted yesterday, because she just really is so cringeworthy, Kamala speaking to a group of people talking about, like, you know, go get your vaccination. Yeah, it hurt a little bit, but get over it. It was sick. It was a little bit of time. I just had to like lie on the couch. But, you know, the other thing is apparently 50% of the people who are not vaccinated say that they're worried about having to miss work if they have side effects from the vaccine. That's a big number of people. And that, again, like, we don't have paid sick leave. We have people who are reliant on checks for, like, they live check to check. If they miss a check, if they miss a shift, that could be the difference between them, you know, paying their rent barely, because who can pay their rent in this country, and like getting thrown out on the street. I mean, it is all interconnected. So it's not just so easy to say, oh, buck up, soldier, go get your vaccine. Like, there has to be some compassion for the situation that we've created that is so heinous for people that they're terrified to miss a day of work, right?
Yeah. And I mean, essentially, we're at the point right now where in September, a lot of the protections expire. Like, I know in California, people that didn't pay their electric bill or, you know, some of these things during this time, all the protections to not be evicted are gone.
Yeah.
as of September. So, so what happens then? I mean, are we in a better place? We're right now at a place where the virus is almost what it was. It's taking, the infection rate is almost what it was last year.
In October. I mean,
and
yeah.
When you consider that, nearly half the population is vaccinated and the rates are still at almost what they were last year, maybe that's something to panic about. I mean,
well, yeah. And we flattened, like, it does not look like we're at, I think 48% of adults 18 and over are fully vaccinated. And that number doesn't really seem to be moving. So if you want to change that, I mean, I agree with you. And I know, like, there are other mitigation, approaches that should be taken and they're not being. But even if you're just all in for, like, the vaccination is the only way we're ever going to get rid of this, then instead of just blaming people and yelling at them, let's try to convince them, like, just to, so then that will get into the whole thing with Facebook, that they're now going to try to, kick people off Facebook, flag your messages, your text messages. That is not convincing anybody. If you think that 100 million people aren't vaccinated right now, adults, you think that flagging a few posts on Facebook is going to change those minds? I mean, good luck to you. I don't see that that's the way to get people on your side.
Yeah, and this week, one of the White House reporters actually pushed back on that issue, because I'm all for efforts by social media to cancel misinformation, but you have to do it delicately. Like, it has to be something known that is clearly, like, who decides this stuff? It's such a fine line. So, like, the pushback at the White House was that, at the White House press conference, was that Jennifer Psaki basically said that Facebook and other social medias were taking steps to remove some of this misinformation. And the reporter asked, well, you guys declared basically that if the people saying that that COVID could have been a man-made outbreak,
right, from the lab leak.
Yeah, a lab leak. Thank you very much. This is the IPA kicking in. Yeah,
you're such a lightweight.
But so, that was one seen as clear misinformation. Like, oh, that's just propaganda if you're saying that. That absolutely can't be true. It's just some narrative being spun. And a lot of people are actually open to the idea that, yeah, maybe it wasn't malicious, but it still could have been something created in a lab because they were trying to create a variable to test and yada, yada. That's not unreasonable. And it's not unreasonable to question that. So that a few months ago would have been like, oh, you're banned from Facebook.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, I have to say, I don't think that our tech companies, our social media tech bro guys, have a place in shutting down information, even if it's misinformation. I mean, I really do think that the best way to deal with misinformation or disinformation is more good information, true information. And my fear is that, if you cancel the people who are spreading whatever, that COVID could possibly lead to what? I mean, now, there are possible side effects to these vaccinations. I am pro-vaccination. We were in line the second that this vaccination was available to us, and then to my 15-year-old, the same. So I am 100% pro-vaccination, but I'm also 100% open discussion, talking about possible side effects, very real side effects. It should all be out there. I don't want Zuckerberg and his, company telling me what we're supposed to believe. I mean, I know the big example of that was right before the election, when the New York Post was running with the hacked, Hunter Biden laptop. And they were shut down. They were banned from New York Post, banned from Twitter. You could not write about Hunter Biden. Well, that does nothing to help people have any trust in our institutions at all.
Exactly. And not to give Google praise, because Google is largely an evil empire as well
Yeah.
now, where initially they were not. But there is, if you use Google Chrome, this week they released an app. It's an add-in you can put on Google Chrome that will display people's affiliations. This person is paid by this organization. This person receives money by the Democratic Party. This person,
Wait, is that across the board? Like if Brooklyn Dad wrote something, would it say that?
I haven't tested it so much yet, but it does work on Twitter. So if you log into Twitter on using Chrome and you have that app installed, it shows you the known affiliations of people paying these people.
Okay.
So that's a step in the right direction to me, because like,
it's like NASCAR.
I mean, I almost think the daily the public is always going to be, a large chunk of the public is always going to be misinformed, and we don't want them to not be communicating and discussing all this stuff in public. But when you're in the press and you're paid by Raytheon and your opinion there is on a war, that should be public notice. And so that app is just, I mean, that add-on for Chrome is a step in the right direction. I mean, more of that, please.
Yeah. As long as it's uniform, I'm all for that. I really am.
Watch it just flag Republicans.
Or like lefties, right? And I saw, I mean, but I did just see Fauci saying that he meets with Bill Gates about the vaccines every 2 weeks. I'm just like, what is happening? Why is that happening? I mean, Fauci should have been fired after the whole mask thing. I'm not sure why he was let off the hook, but that Dr. Birx woman was thrown under the bus. So it's just so fascinating to me. It kind of reminds me when Carl Woodward, he knew back in February when he was interviewing Trump in February 2020 that Trump knew that this was way more serious than the flu, that it was respiratory, that it killed your lungs, that it was going to probably be a global pandemic. But Woodward held on to that information
for the book.
Yeah. And somehow people still came away with that, only blaming Trump, when there's Woodward, who's supposed to be a journalist, and he had that information in February 2020, right? So like everybody, I guess, just chooses the lane that he wants to support.
My next book has some serious life-saving information in it. So please buy my next book.
Pay. Watch out after the break.
What else do we have for graphics?
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So this is something that has really been bothering me from the beginning. And I have to say, even some of my favorites are not so tuned into the long-term effects of COVID on children. They seem all to just be saying kids aren't affected. Kids don't really comprise a big percentage of the people who are being affected, who have long COVID, who go to the hospital, who die. And the truth is, so the problem is 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago now, when everybody was told, hey, mask off, we're going to open up, we're building back better, we're back to normal, it's July 4th, wahoo.
The literal mission accomplished moment.
Mission accomplished. And what they were forgetting, even if you only want to say that this is, the pandemic of the unvaccinated and they deserve to die, which was a horrendous thing to say, but apparently Democrats feel really comfortable with that. They seem to be forgetting that the under 12 crowd is not allowed to get vaccinated yet. And we're just throwing them to the wolves. Anyway, my favorite doctor, Eric Fiegelding, but he's been calling out the CDC from the beginning. And I mean, he was calling out Trump, and he was, he's been sort of castigated as an alarmist by people who want everything to go back to normal, which used to be people on the right. Now it's people on the left, whatever, liberals. But he's been pretty on top of it from the beginning, from like last January 2020, about how serious this was going to be. And he's been right on, I think pretty much everything. But he has been saying we cannot take masks off indoors. We cannot go from 6 feet to 3 feet, as you were saying, because even 6 feet is not adequate, that this is an airborne virus and we need air filters. We need better circulation in classrooms. We need distance. And so I'm happy to see that he's been consistent on that, even though he was a Biden supporter at the end when it was down between Biden and Trump. And he certainly is on the, political left whatever.
Right, but you see that he's still critical and
Yeah.
suggesting what we should be doing. So, you know, say he was Fauci right now, we would have a different opinion. You know, if you were hearing him present the risk being put to people, to our kids right now, the public would react differently. But you know, we're not even talking about COVID much anymore. I mean,
No.
COVID is not really the big thing anymore on the news.
They're
And
just
it's like,
blaming it on anybody who's too stupid to get a vaccination and Facebook. And that's it. They're just like, that's it. That's over. It's over.
right. And I mean, the
It's
clear thing is that if you go out in public and you have the vaccination, you could possibly catch, and very easily catch, the new Delta variant.
Yes.
Now, most likely it's not going to kill you. You're not going to get sick. You might get a little sick, most likely. But the kids aren't vaccinated. So if you're just treating that as normal kind of day, and you go to Target without a mask and you come home, you give to your kids. So the message shouldn't be to not wear masks yet.
Right.
I'm sorry. In large groups, it just should not be. And that's the message being put out right now.
It's terrifying. And also, I mean, what's even worse is this Delta variant seems to be so highly transmissible that it's even happening in very random passings outdoors. They're finding it now. But we're only really getting scientific data from other countries because the US is not logging that kind of data yet. They have just recently said, I think in the past couple days, they have responded to a lot of pressure from scientists who've been saying, if we're not tracking the virus in people who you might be asymptomatic, but you're passing it on, if we're not tracking that virus, we're not doing science. Like, it's a joke. If you're really only saying, well, it's only the morons in Missouri who didn't get vaccinated who are dying, then that's not science, that's politics, right? So yes, I'm so grateful to people like Dr. Eric Ding, and there are quite a few others. I think Topol, sorry, I'm not going to get them all right. But anyway, there's quite a few others who are pushing back on the CDC, but this does not inspire confidence. You know, a quarter of our public is Democrat, a quarter is Republican, and half of the voting population doesn't even play. So you are losing 3/4 of the voting adult people who see that this is a farce.
Right. Yeah, we're basically doing what we accused Republicans of doing in certain states like Texas, and you know, they're hiding the numbers. Florida, they're hiding the numbers. They're hiding the numbers. They're hiding the numbers. Well, right now we're hiding them nationally because we're not testing enough to have numbers. We just said, like, can you imagine Trump saying, well, we're not going to track the numbers of infected people? Are you kidding me? But we're doing that, and it's completely acceptable, and there's no pushback on it right now.
That's the Believe Science crowd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't get me started on fracking, because
I mean, yeah. I mean, that's also the thing, is that it's really frustrating to me because I've seen a lot of liberals on Facebook are really angry. And these are the people that have accused me of being too angry for the last, 6 years, 7 years. And they don't want to hear about Medicare for All, the Green New Deal. They don't want me to be mad at Biden or the Democratic Party, and I'm helping Trump if I ever criticize. They are livid that they have to now put on a mask in Southern California to go to the movies. Their fun has been ruined by the Trumpers. That's all they're talking about. They're so angry. And when I push back at all, they're like, just go, they don't understand why there might be some skepticism or hesitancy, or why there is so much mistrust of our institutions. And, I feel like the idea that you're going to be angry about the people who don't get vaccines, but not angry that, how many did we just, 1,200 fracking pipelines? I mean, some like crazy number. I'm probably making that up, but like no real part of the new infrastructure bill has to do with, climate change. I mean, that's an apocalypse for millions of people. They don't want to talk about that.
Yep. I mean, I think, so the billionaires in their space missions, did you see Bezos? Bezos was literally saying, like, we're gonna do a lot of the things that are toxic to this planet up in space. Like, seriously, so that's your spin on this stuff. Is it okay? First off, your little billionaire space travel Disneyland doesn't even go into space. It's not even going anywhere. So we're supposed to support you so that you can somehow fix climate change eventually by producing products up in space somewhere or something.
Exporting your trash. Yeah.
We're gonna do some nuclear space energy thing, or what is it? Like they don't have an answer on it. There's no answer to how they could do this, but this is just sort of the vague bullshit that people are like, oh yay, space, yay, oh, it's gonna somehow a benefit to climate change.
NASA. Apparently there was somebody on the news today, because my mom told me, hi mom, I think she's watching, but that somebody from NASA said that this was actually going to be helpful, that they were doing this, which just feels like, oh my God, they even have NASA coming out to toe the company line.
I don't even know who it was, but it was a former director or something, older black guy, but I watched that too. And he was
we're gonna
happy about it. Like,
that's not helping scientific discovery. It just is not. We know that. We did this, by the way, there's no discovery. We did it in 1961. We sent the first person to space, or Russia did. We did it in 62. This isn't new. And Bezos and Branson and Elon Musk, whatever the hell, all these, they're heavily subsidized by taxpayer money. This is not like they're not paying for this out of their own pocket. And even if they were, it would be money that they stole from their workers.
And Bezos is getting subsidized by like $3 billion or something. But the point is, they're just barely out of the Earth's atmosphere. They're just barely right above it. Yeah. So they haven't extended the bounds of what we can test by anything, because they're literally a bazillion miles from the last people. NASA went bazillions of miles farther than wherever they are now. And
60 years ago.
And these guys are up for 15 minutes in space versus weeks at these space stations. So if you think there's some massive testing, it's like saying, I'm going to open Disneyland. I have this crazy ride. It does this stuff, and we're going to do some testing on that ride.
Yeah.
And it's going to change the world.
Yeah.
Like it's a whole bunch of bullshit.
But unfortunately, that's what the media is pushing, right? So like, again, it's sort of why we created this show, right? To punch up. And I feel like it's always being directed to the least among us, right? So liberals are blaming the anti-vax crowd. And there are many reasons that people are anti-vax, right? And we're told, don't use straws and recycle. There's like 7 companies that have done more harm to the whole globe than anything you could do by recycling, right? It feels like it's always displaced, where we need to focus our attention and our anger and the shame that they should be feeling for what they've done, but it's just never there.
Yeah, and I didn't listen to all of Bezos' his words, but apparently he said a lot of sort of anti-Jeff Bezos things, like, it was a guilty, I think it was a guilty moment in a way. Like he got up there and he actually looked down at the earth and was like, I'm a fucking evil person. So he had this moment of saying a few decent things, but at the end of the day, like, put your money where your mouth is. There's so many things you can.
For him, he did not have any kind of epiphany. I don't believe it.
Yeah, no true epiphany. Come on. I mean, he thanked Amazon workers and people who shopped at Amazon for his spaceship.
Yeah.
And then you had the other billionaire, Branson with Virgin.
Oh my God.
I guess it's like $55 million or something to go on his flight. But they're going to give it. There's a lottery where one peon gets to go on this thing. Like, and somehow that's like, they're all trying to put some spin on this. That's like good for people, but like taking one normal person up when 15 people go and they all pay $55 million.
I mean, it's a sick society. And, so we were on the Vanguard podcast earlier. I love those guys. Thank you. But they ran a clip that was brilliant that I hadn't seen from Russell Brand. And we need the American version or the US version of Russell Brand. It was so smart and, pointed against Richard Branson. And somehow he has so far escaped the like the
he's like the best billionaire.
Yeah, we love him here. He's so much better than everybody else. But he of course he's used his billions of dollars to work against the national health care in Britain, trying to privatize things. He is like not one of those people. You don't earn $1 billion. Nobody can earn $1 billion. You do it by stealing the labor and hoarding the resources. That is the only way to do it. So these are all disgusting specimens of humanity, and somehow they're being lionized on the media every day.
That's exactly it. I mean, you don't get, Amazon they treat their workers like absolute piss, and that's, they're locked. The hours and the stress and the unmeetable quotas are just insane. And so that's why he made all his money, is that he basically has labor at a cheaper rate than all of the competition.
Yeah.
Because he's evil to his employees.
Yeah.
And they're able to negotiate these deals because they're such a part of our government that they lobby for sweet deals and are able to get none of it has to do with being a brilliant businessman. It has to do with having a lot of money and having no moral character is what it comes down to.
That is it. That's the whole kit and caboodle.
So
all right.
I was just going to say, I don't know where Shahid is yet. He's supposed to be here.
He's supposed to be here. I feel like it's false advertising.
No, he's
fake media. Fake media. We put it out there. He is supposed to be here. So we're going to keep hanging out. Should we go on to our next segment?
I think we should, but that's also a good idea. Every night we tell people someone huge is coming. Like Jeff Bezos is going to be on.
Bernie's on next week, you guys.
Next week, tune in for Bernie.
Bernie's coming. Were you about to take a potty break? I felt like
I was going to lean over and definitely not go off screen to grab a beer out of my fridge.
I just wish you would have some of your bourbon, Pat.
Oh my God, I forgot.
It's not happening tonight. But can I just ask you, this is really actually very important.
Yes.
Do you have your air conditioning working?
Oh yeah. I am legit here. I have air conditioning. Life is good.
That's good. All right. Well, cheers. So we're going to move on to our next segment, which if you haven't already started drinking or doing whatever you might do to numb the pain, you want to do it now, because this was truly painful. So
go on. No, please go on.
I love to criticize Democrats because they have betrayed me. I've never been a Republican. I don't even know any Republicans, but Democrats say they're going to fight for me. They lie. They're taking the spot of people who might actually fight for the policies I want. So that betrayal is much worse to me on some level than the person who just says, we don't give a shit about you, which is the Republicans. The Democrats, every 4 years or 2 years, make a big show about how they believe about access to healthcare and the environment, and they believe science, and then they, give away the pipeline permit, and they give away billions of dollars to the healthcare insurance industry, and they won't cancel student debt or legalize marijuana. So it's a big lie, and that is, to me, much more harmful.
Yeah, imagine anyone else in that space that actually believed or fought for what the Democrats say they would.
Yeah. Okay. So this is my long way around saying I have never watched Fox News or anybody on Fox News. I just never have, because they're so repugnant to me on every single level. But in the interest of fairness, because Pat and I are nothing if not fair, and we want to
balance.
Balance.
That's definitely a Fox News score.
Yeah, I know. God, maybe they have been infiltrating me. We watched Tucker Carlson. Okay.
Yeah.
Wait, can we take away the Dr. Eric?
Oh, yes, of course. It's gone.
Oh, hey. Oh, there you are. You were so small before. I like having you. I feel like now we're up here together again. Okay. So here's what was actually terrifying to me. Oh, Right. Oh my God, it's all coming over. It's like,
Look at that.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, good. Nice work.
That's why next week we have a different.
You're wearing all the hats, my friend. You deserve all the Patreon.
All the blame for bad graphics.
No, God.
By the way, cheers. Since we're waiting for Shahid, we might as well have a cocktail.
Cheers. Hey, cheers. It's 5:55. This is my second glass of wine. Third drink, second glass of wine. I don't know if the Vanguard guys knew that I was having a little bit of something on the side there. It was a crazy morning. I spent 2 hours doing my lighting. Come on. What do you want from me? Okay. So we watched Tucker Carlson, so you don't have to. And, he's smug and gross, but kind of no smugger and grosser than what's her name, whom I used to adore, Rachel Maddow. Everything is said with kind of like this sick, like, and then the Democrats who left and absconded and left Texas and didn't do what they were being paid to do, and they all went off unmasked. Oh, believe science. It's like everything is kind of like smarmy like that, and he's just like going to go in for the zinger. And he talks about how these Texas Democrats who left to avoid having to vote on the voting, right? Is it like gerrymandering that's happening in Texas, or the voting rights?
Yeah, the Voting Rights Act or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it's gross. And by the way, I'm so thrilled that finally a few Democrats are playing hardball, go do it. But they get on a freaking plane without a mask. And of course, 10 of them or 10% of them, I don't even know, but get COVID.
Yeah, I think 6 or 7 had COVID or have COVID.
Right.
And then didn't they give it to
Pelosi?
They met.
It could be, but they also met with Kamala. And so then she had to be tested.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, they had there's a picture of them all, and this is a posed picture that they want out to the public, of them all on a plane leaving, and it's obviously like a private plane or something because it's small and narrow. Right. It's not your Joe.
It's
America
the party
Airlines.
of the working class.
Yeah, so here they are all on this narrow plane, no masks, smiling like crazy, and then 6 or 7 of them get COVID.
So of course there is nothing that gives Tucker a hard on better than that, right? That is just.
I could think of some things, but it's not.
It's up there though. Come on, that's up there.
Yeah.
At least on Monday night, he seemed super, super excited about it.
But his whole thing in the press is that Democrats are hypocrites. And so when he makes that case to the public using stuff like this, he's correct. So as a Democrat watching that, I'm like, yeah, he's right on that. And obviously he's using it to make points to support a party that doesn't believe in any science whatsoever. Right. But when he does point out where Democrats are hypocrites, he's not wrong.
Which is heartbreaking for me. This was my party, right? So it destroys me to see this. And so he brought up a lot of the points that we brought up before, which is, when they talk about the prime minister, I don't know, of Britain was talking about, 60% of their hospitalized cases right now are people who are vaccinated. Then a couple days later, he walked that back and corrected it and said, no, it was actually 40% who were vaccinated, who were hospitalized. And so, of course, Tucker kind of says, well, we still haven't seen the statistics. But, he's right. The only way to combat all of this, which is why I don't believe that anybody should be shut down, is with the truth and transparency. Let's see the actual numbers. I want to know. It actually doesn't change my mind about the vaccine right now, although who knows, I'm vaccinated. But we need to know what the contagion is like. So he really, he talked a lot about that. He talked about I don't know how they pronounce the VAERS database, right? The vaccine, the people who have had bad reactions to the vaccine. Right. I don't think that those numbers are substantial, but they're worth talking about. And if we're not actually tracking that, that's a problem. And people should be able to speak about it. And people's fears need to be voiced and then dealt with logically.
Well, yeah, so a lot of people got the Pfizer vaccine and afterwards were sick for a day or two. but like trying to suppress that information is not helping people. Like,
Right.
it's better to say, look, all these people got sick for a day or two and they were fine. They were fine. And now they're safe forever, or,
Right.
you know, whatever it is. But like, you never win people over by bullshit. In the long run, it's going to cost you. And that's the problem. Is the media and the people in the Biden administration telling bullshit.
Yeah.
They're only reinforcing Tucker's narratives with this stuff when they're hypocrites and not actually believing science like they should be.
Yeah. So that's too bad. And he wasn't wrong, even though he's wrong on a million things. But in this one part, he wasn't wrong. You know, the other thing, so then he was saying, well, how many young people have died of COVID? What is the immunity of people who have already had COVID? Like, why do they need to get the shot if what the shot does is build your immune system, your defenses against it? Well, if you've already had COVID, why are those people being asked? And I do think that these are questions that people have. They just want to know, like, what is the truth? Then he had on Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, I'm going to mispronounce it, but from Stanford. So of course, you know, you see Stanford and you're like, okay, well, you know, somebody believes in this guy, who was very anti-lockdown and was saying we've decoupled the virus from death. So in other words, if you're vaccinated and you're infected, you're likely not going to be going to the hospital, and you're much more likely to not die of it. But as you said, you know, in Israel, in the UK, they're telling us different numbers. So that's problematic. Although, of course, that was Tucker against his earlier proposition.
There are different numbers on death, but then, you know, we do know what's not being reported is how the story is not out there about all these long-term COVID people, all the long effects of just having like, say you're sick from it for 2 months. Some of these people, I mean, for all we know, you could have neurological issues that come back in a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 5 years from now. We just don't know that stuff. So,
we don't have Medicare for all. So if you got your SOL,
right? And we're still in a situation where most insurance companies are not they're not addressing long-term COVID issues. Like, long-term COVID is not try to get approved for disability on long-term COVID, even though you can't get out of bed. Some of these people can't, they just can't, they have fuzzy brain all damn day. I mean, there's so many issues
tired, or they can't breathe, right?
You can't work if you can't, think clearly. I mean, you could work from home. I mean, it just depends on the job, but like the story is not getting told. The story is getting suppressed about what happens to these people.
Right. So. And there's no accommodation being made long-term for this, right? So like at the beginning of the Biden presidency, I think, was it The Prospect? David Dayen, who had this whole list of things that Biden could do on day one, and it would be creative, but they were executive orders that he could take that, of course, somebody like Bernie would have taken. And one was Medicare for All, right? If you can make every COVID treatment for this year free, even though we've now read so many so many stories of people who haven't, who have been charged, which is disgusting. But if you can do, every shot, every treatment for COVID is free this year, then you could do anybody's medical, anything is free this year, because it's all interrelated. Like, you cannot compartmentalize people's health or the environment or their living wage. Like, it all is intertwined.
Right. So I would like to Shahid. Shahid is in the waiting room. We're going to leave him there for like 10 minutes to just bake and think about why he's late. No, okay. Just kidding. I love the guy. So hang on one second.
And we watched it. Oh God, thank you that you saved us from having to keep talking about Rob.
Yeah, so I'm going to bring him on in just a short second.
We might not even come back to Tucker.
Hello.
Hey, Gary. How are you? Great to be with you.
Hi, welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
I'm honored to be with you. It's great to I don't think, Lila, we've spoken before, but I'm glad to meet you. It's great to see you guys.
And thank you for pronouncing my name correctly. That's so nice. I think speaking from one person who's probably commonly mispronounced to the other. So thank you.
If I had a nickel for every time my name was mangled, I would be as wealthy as the incumbent that I am challenging. But
Yeah.
Unfortunately,
Nice. Yeah, I was going to make a Bezos or a Branson joke, but that's way better. That's smarter. Yeah, she's awful. Okay, I'm getting a weird echo. Does anybody else have an echo?
I think it could be coming through, Shahid, your mic or something, speakers.
Are we?
Is that any better? I just changed a setting.
Yes.
That helps?
Oh.
Great.
No, I still hear myself in your background.
Okay.
It's okay.
We'll get it.
I can switch to earphones. Let me do that.
Earbuds would
I'm on
fix it,
my
sure.
second glass of wine. It seems to be my third. But I still hear it, Pat. I don't think it's a shot. What do you think?
It's still pivoting over, so give me 1 second.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Okay. Oh,
There we go. Is that any better?
Yes, that's brilliant.
There we go.
Hey,
great.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I know, just to jump in, I know you've been busy. Just yesterday, if you want to bring up some of the stuff that you filed some legal actions against some of the defamation in San Francisco. And,
yeah, just one.
Just one action, but
yeah.
So, for people that don't know, there was a lot of misinformation spread by the press about you back in the race against Nancy Pelosi for San Francisco. So, I mean, if you just want to jump in and tell us about your case, that'd be a good place to start with this.
Sure. So yesterday, just late last night, we filed a federal lawsuit, a defamation action against the San Francisco Chronicle. And I, don't take this lightly. I'm an advocate for press freedom, so much so, frankly, that I've defended the press at times that they don't defend themselves. And I brought this suit ultimately to defend election integrity and challenge white supremacy. The lies about me were, frustrating, but when they were published in a newspaper of record, despite never being plausible at all, and just to be clear here, the newspaper knew at the time of its publication that the person who had accused me of harassment had accused many other people before, including other anti-war candidates for federal office, including an activist at a prominent environmental organization, and the Chronicle chose not to disclose it. And when over a dozen people wrote to the Chronicle to make it quite clear what in DC is not a secret in any way, the Chronicle chose to misrepresent their letter, dismiss it as a bunch of my friends saying this guy's not bad, again, ignoring and suppressing the facts about the previous history of accusation. Very critical facts for the voters to know that readers of the Chronicle would never have heard. They never corrected the story, and these lies were not only inaccurate and unethical to publish, but these are racist lies. This is a classic tool of white supremacy. I am far from the first man of color to be falsely accused of sexual misconduct. Now, for these allegations to surface after 20 years, 3 months before an election, might raise some eyebrows as to the question of the timing. But the part I would really focus on is not just the white supremacy intrinsic in this kind of accusation, but the political motivations clear in its timing. And political motivations in no way diminish the racism, right? Race is not just about race. Its ultimate racism is mostly about power and capital and using race as a lever to enforce unequal distributions of power and capital. And I am a brown immigrant challenging the quintessence of power and capital, the seventh wealthiest member of Congress, the most powerful Democrat in the House. And I paid a profound price for it. And ultimately, the press is entitled under the First Amendment to print things even that might be inaccurate. However, the press is not entitled under the First Amendment to weaponize known fabrication and to publish racist election disinformation. And that's ultimately what this case is about. The network that spread that disinformation continues to be active and at large today. And I'm aiming to defend the integrity of the 2022 election as much as to address the integrity of the 2020 election.
Right. And from what I understand, you gave them ample opportunity to fix their mistakes and offer your countering viewpoint. And I mean, to me, that's the biggest part of the clearest part of their guilt in this situation is that they didn't give you the opportunity, and they clearly ignored evidence that could have made your case.
Right. The suppression of whistleblowers is a common thread here. This wasn't the only lie about me told either. There was a whole other set of lies that were told about me by the same people who brought this false accusation forward. And in every case, there were whistleblowers suppressed by journalists. The Chronicle suppressed people who came forward to explain, for instance, how their own life partners were accused by the person who accused me many years ago. The Chronicle was approached by people who themselves had been accused by that person. And then the facts eventually emerged. And while this was all happening, I didn't say anything about my accuser. I didn't punch back. I knew that I frankly believe women is something I believe. I was very eager to hear the facts come out because I knew the facts would vindicate me. And what was really frustrating was to witness all these stories get printed, all these interviews happen. I couldn't share what I knew because as an accused person, I can't say all these things that I know. I was waiting for the press to just uncover the facts, and somehow the facts just never came out. And they did eventually, but it took months. And the idea in the middle of an election, and just to be clear, I not only was the first, I am the only Democrat to have ever faced Nancy Pelosi in a general election. And I won more votes than anyone she has ever faced in the generation that she held the seat, in spite of a racist character assassination by the paper of record. And I'm quite proud of that result. And I'm eager to finish the job. When the suppression.
I certainly wish it had been a different result, just so you know.
Well, and
I
for people
appreciate
that don't know, I mean, San Francisco Chronicle has a great reach across all of California. It's basically the largest newspaper in the state. I mean, I would think, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it?
LA Times, I think, has an edge
LA
on it,
Times.
but
Oh,
it's
yeah,
one
I
of
forget
the
it.
biggest. Yeah.
I forget Southern California exists because I'm a Northern California person.
I'm Southern.
But I mean, I'm in Sacramento, and I would say that probably as many people here get the San Francisco Chronicle as they get the Sacramento Bee, which is our local paper. So,
yep,
it's not insignificant.
I wanted to talk to you because I feel like all of these accusations that happened against sort of insurgent candidates ended up being shown to be false and problematic. When they were happening, the line was believe women, right? Elizabeth Warren said Bernie Sanders can never be president, believe women. And I feel like I sort of, I don't mean to tone police the Me Too movement, but believe women to me is a little problematic because women are just like men, capable of lying. And while I do think that we need to change the way we view women who accuse men of rape and sexual harassment institutionally, I also think it's worrisome to decide that, it's so difficult to come forward. And if a woman came forward, then that must be taken as gospel. And we can't push back on that because as we saw with you and with other candidates, it becomes weaponized. And the pushback is then, that you're sexist, of course, not, you're sexist if it's Christine Blasey Ford, but not if it's Tara Reid. You're sexist if it, so how do you respond to that?
I think of the Me Too movement as too important to be reduced to a political weapon. And every woman, I think, has dealt with guys who, and every survivor of whatever gender has dealt with situations where people are unwilling to mind their own boundaries. And, I'm committed to survivors and I'm committed to transparency. And I think the point of Believe Women was believe people enough to look at the evidence. Don't shut people down. Don't ignore people.
Right.
But it didn't mean, I don't think it was supposed to mean, anybody who says anything must be believed at the drop of a hat, because frankly, that's how every incident of racial terror across the South unfolded. And people forget that. And, this is part of what intersectionality means, is to have an awareness of how different dimensions of marginalization intersect, interact. And in this case, when you see the Me Too movement reduced to a political sword to accuse and shield to avoid answering any questions, the idea that accusation without evidence should be treated as fact in spite of whistleblowers. And I want to dial this up just to be clear here. The people who accused me and who claimed to stand with women, they were bullying, threatening, harassing, hacking, and are now smearing women while claiming to stand for women. And there's a particular whistleblower who was silenced for an entire year who just published her own experience about a week or two ago. Her name's Gloria Berry. And if the racism of the accusations towards me were not illustrative enough of white supremacy, watching what happened to Gloria, for me, sort of forced me to understand what was happening. I was quite resistant to the idea that what I was encountering was a reflection of white supremacy, frankly. I've never been racialized in the way that I was last year. And I'm an immigrant with brown skin. I'm Muslim, and I grew up in rural Missouri. Just to be
Oh my
clear.
God, I didn't know you grew up in Missouri. That's crazy.
Yeah, I grew up in Rosebud, Missouri. It's a town of 300 people. The entire town, there are two last names, the Pullmans and the Waymeyers, and they were lovely to us.
Right.
And I had, frankly, a somewhat idyllic experience in the 70s and 80s in that community before, my particular ethnicity was politicized in the early 2000s.
Right.
And never have I encountered anything even remotely resembling the racism that I did as a relatively prolific public figure in San Francisco in 2020 at the hands of institutions, including not just the San Francisco Chronicle, but many that would very vociferously repudiate racism, like Democratic Socialists of America comes to mind, or the Harvey Milk LGBT Democratic Club. And I fought for gay rights in the courts 15 years ago, long before marriage equality was established. I was one of the leading advocates, one of the first advocates in the country for it. And I was lit on fire by an LGBT Democratic club that then endorsed Pelosi and appointed to its board multiple people who were lying about me in the press. And, the conflicts of interest among my critics, the fact that their stories kept changing, they never had any specifics. Many of them were rewarded for their lies by the party establishment. And then Gloria, who at the time raised her voice, not a single journalist in the country called her back. And this isn't just a supporter of mine with an opinion.
Right.
This is an elected party official who my critics tried to recruit to participate in their plot, and she refused. Tried to blow a whistle, and everyone silenced her. The clubs silenced her, the press silenced her. And it's one thing to accuse a brown immigrant man of a bunch of, not just a thing, but a whole rack of things that are untrue. Right. But then to silence the Afro-Latino whistleblower who points out the falsity of these allegations in order, and just go back to, racism is not just about race, it's about power and capital. Go back to the context. I'm the first Democrat in a generation to challenge a plutocrat who co-opts the Democratic Party as the most powerful voice in the House. And when these accusations are leveled, nobody has the independence to just step back and consider what are the interests at stake. And I just go back to where I started. The Me Too movement is incredibly significant. And the experiences of survivors, and frankly, all women, are incredibly important. And people deserve to be heard in order to bring forth evidence. But I don't think people deserve to be thrown under the bus in the face of evidence and when whistleblowers expose the political interests underlying false accusation. I frankly would love to see more Me Too movement advocates defend their own movement from being reduced to a sword and a shield, because it is much more than that. And it's disappointing to me to see political critics trade on, such serious accusations for the sake of trying to advance the political agenda. It's really gross to me. It's revolting, frankly, and I think our democracy deserves much better.
I think that's part of the problem is that, we're in a situation where we knew, as a progressive who's followed a lot of these campaigns, the hits are going to come at a certain period in the campaign. Your campaign
Right.
advisor probably advises you ahead of time, this is when it's going to come. They're going to hit you here with the smears. And then in your situation, you largely handled things how we're trained to think somebody in your situation should handle those things initially. You sat
Right.
back but you paid a political price for it because we don't have a media willing to tell the full story. So we're kind of in uncharted territory there of, what is the right way to address this if we don't have time for the due diligence to investigate the story, yet we know we're in a situation where there's a huge interest to put out a false story, and it's almost expected at this point.
I think that,
but so go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
well, just the first thing is just to not publish stories on a deadline, to do due diligence. When the press publishes an accusation on a deadline without calling whistleblowers, that's a problem. And again, if accusations are legitimate, they deserve to be aired. But I don't think that journalists, are operating within any kind of defensible ethical boundary if accusation is enough to then lead to publication. That's an invitation to character assassination. And our democracy, just to be clear, cannot withstand that. It's an open recipe to entrench the existing actors and insulate them from any critique. And that's not a problem for me. I was the subject of these lies, but I was not the target. The targets were the voters of San Francisco. And ultimately, not just does our democracy deserve better, but I think voters deserve better. Even the press, I would say, deserves better than to reduce itself to being, a stenographic transmitter of whatever party hack wants to make up whatever lie they want, right? I mean, the press ethics suggest the importance of accuracy and taking care, due diligence to ensure accuracy,
right,
and suppressing whistleblowers, ignoring evidence, rushing to publication without any even opportunity to consider the facts, and then refusing to correct stories when the ultimate truth comes out. All of those are perfect examples of unethical,
Absolutely.
in my case, ultimately racist press behavior. And it is, I think, a damage not just to the reputations of the people who are, drawn into the gaping maw of that sort of attack machine, but ultimately when we're talking about candidates for office, it's our democracy that internalizes the harm. And I ran for office to defend our democracy from the corruption of Wall Street and unaccountable intelligence agencies. And I'm not going to shrink from the need to defend it against unethical press serving a racist political establishment.
I mean, I so appreciate that. And, the Washington Post, the democracy dies in darkness. I mean, it's so laughable, but it's true. And the fact that abdication of duty is the death of democracy, because when we don't know the facts, we can't act on the facts, and voters are left, as you said, that actually is the target. The voters suffer. I mean, you suffered, and I'm so sorry, but the voters suffer also, and democracy is squashed. Pat, I know you have something to say, and I wanted to ask, I do want to ask a question, but go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to ask, how do we handle that in the future in this exact same situation? And I don't think we have too many viable options, but I think your lawsuit is one avenue to address this. So I support your lawsuit entirely. I think we need to hold the press accountable when they're clearly in situations where they're suppressing the truth intentionally, and particularly to help a candidate is really especially gross. So
yeah.
I appreciate that. Lila, you had a question?
Yeah, I do, because you're so eloquent and so brilliant, and so you're going to frame this response, I hope, to I read through your whole question and answer at the end, and everybody should check out your website, because you really sort of go through every question that might come up as a pre-question and respond to it so beautifully. And something that was really disheartening to me recently, when Bill Cosby was let out of jail on a technicality, and there were a group of people who said, well, he's just one in a long line who has been accused of things in this racist system, and this is as old as Emmett Till, and we've been doing white women have been doing this forever. And please know, I believe you, I've heard you, I've read about you, I've been following you for years. So, but my worry is, or not my worry, I would love to hear your response, how that your case is so different from how the people who are trying to make an excuse for somebody who is so obviously not a victim of the system.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you're asking me to distinguish myself from Bill Cosby, just to be
sorry,
clear,
I didn't mean, that's gross. No, you don't. I didn't mean to put you in that spot. You are completely not like Bill Cosby.
But if I can, just to put it out there,
sorry.
When you have evidence and multiple accusers, that's a legitimate situation where it probably is appropriate for there to be some penalty, at least scrutiny, at least investigation in prosecution, right? There's a big difference between situations where you have legions of people and mountains of evidence, and situations where there is conspicuously none of either. And especially when you have whistleblowers and evidence that would suggest that a bunch of claims are not true, right? And that's the difference I would suggest. I think to people who are eager to celebrate anyone, for instance, getting out of the gaping maw of the criminal justice system, and I think there are some abolitionists who maybe react to his experience through that lens. It's not dissimilar from people who object to, people who participate in the insurrection not getting bigger sentences. On the one hand, there is a desire for equity that might lead people to celebrate whatever decarceratory thing happens, or to celebrate, whenever somebody from a dominant social class, gets it bad. But like those aren't actually abolitionist steps forward, right? A person getting out on because they made an agreement with a prosecutor that they weren't going to be prosecuted based on that's very different from, a system of incarceration being dismantled, either because a liberatory minded DA decides that we're not going to impose cash bail anymore on this community, and so we're not going to turn our courts into a fleecing racket to squeeze blood out of the rocks of our most unfortunate citizens, or whether because Congress one day decides, okay, we're going to finally end qualified immunity and hold cops accountable, right? Or when we start shifting funding from not just police but the carceral justice system into other alternatives to keep people safe and out of the system. Those are the kinds of things that will dismantle mass incarceration. Somebody getting out of prison is not it. And it certainly is a thing worth celebrating if it's somebody who was falsely accused. And we see examples of that every day, unfortunately, because so many people are falsely accused in our system. And our justice system does such a bad job of even considering guilt or innocence, right? The vast majority of people never even have an opportunity to prove their innocence because they're effectively declared guilty through a plea bargaining racket, right? And I experienced a little bit of this. If the more lies you tell about somebody, the more believable some of them become. And that was my critic's objective, is just accuse the guy of everything and people will believe something. I have literally every conversation I have had for the last year, and as a candidate, I'm on the phone constantly or talking to people. I can't tell you how many conversations I have had over the last year, countless, about figments of people's imaginations. While the skies are blood red at high noon, while there's a pandemic that's killed 250,000 Americans because they don't have adequate insurance. And this is what we are talking about. Even at the moment, this very conversation demonstrates the harm to democracy caused by false accusation, because we should be, I hope we do, talk about the urgent solutions that our society needs to deal with the unfolding crisis of the future. And instead, we're dealing with weaponized fabrications that people invent to benefit their political patrons. And it is just really gross at the end of the day.
Amen. And I appreciate that. Before the story broke about your suit, we wanted you on to speak about Medicare for All, which it's
Right
amazing
on.
that you're speaking in LA. And I appreciate you so much for speaking on that. I just wanted to ask a question about that, if I might.
Please.
Because you have a huge activist background. You've done that for years. You're a lawyer as well. I know a lot about you. I've known you somewhat personally, but on the smallest level. But
We
I
met
know
at the
you're an
Democratic
activist.
Convention a couple years ago, if I recall.
Yeah, we met at
correctly,
the
didn't we?
Democratic Convention. I met you initially at a Bernie rally.
Oh, okay.
You probably don't
Which
even
one?
know, because I didn't know who you were in San Francisco in 2016, I believe.
Okay,
So,
right on.
but regardless, so as someone with an activist background, the Medicare for All March is getting criticized by some for sort of not being more of an establishment professional activist backed event. And I'd just like your viewpoints on that, if you might.
Gatekeeping is gross, and it will hold us back if we wait for our institutional actors and allies to give us cues. We are basically wasting our time. And I say this, I'm really grateful for you raising this, because this is a point I would describe of some differentiation among members of the squad, and very much between at least how I aim to enter Congress and some of my allies who are there. I would particularly distinguish Cori Bush here from her allies. Cori is not a city council person who went to Congress. She's not a career politician. Cori is a nurse who was driven by a public health crisis in her community to stand in the street and try to stop people from getting shot by our public servants who are paid public dollars to supposedly serve and protect us. That's Cori. And when you have people come to office from the street, it is a different thing entirely, not just because we are very committed to our principles, but precisely in this dimension. There's a difference between a politician and a constitutional actor. I would describe them as almost inverse modes. A politician does what is popular because it is popular. A constitutional act, I have no interest in what is popular. I could not care less. It's not even interesting to me. I just do what's right. And it just so happens, history over the last 20 years has borne many of us out. And, it's not any genius to stand for human rights. It's pretty straightforward. You know, if you fight power in order to stand with people who have less of it, the path tends to reveal itself. And, you know, when I look at the critiques I've heard of the march, they all rely on some deference either to an inside process in Washington, which, you know, we could wait till each of us ends up in the grave for that. I don't have a lot of confidence it's going to move very fast. Or we can apply a little heat. Now, this is a point also I would note. Many members of Congress, I've sat through any number of grassroots lobbying meetings where members of Congress aim to offer insight and intelligence about what might be helpful to the legislative process. You know, push on this bill, try to get so-and-so to flip on this bill. The more we take our cues from inside actors, we are shooting ourselves in the feet. The grassroots has to set the agenda and then let the policymakers fall in where they will. I say this in a different way to any number of indivisible groups. Indivisible is a network that came up in the wake of the Trump election in 2016. They were founded by congressional staffers who I think did a really good job of explaining how anybody can participate in a process that previously I think was very behind closed doors for a lot of people. And I really applaud that network for bringing a lot of people to the process of citizen lobbying. And it frustrates me to no end that the way they work is by sending out centralized, you know, like sort of at the chapter level talking points around specific bills. And my message to them has always been like, forget the bills, put your members on principles, call for the extreme value-centered demand, and let the policymakers figure out what the particulars are. Because whatever they offer as a bill, it's never going to suffice. It's never going to meet everything we want. So don't fall into their trap. Don't advocate for
The compromise.
Right, exactly. Advocate for the goal and let the prevaricators figure it out. And for the grassroots to be put in this position of arguing for compromise it's a threat to the movement. It's an abdication of our role. And it is frankly yet another way in which institutions wield and perpetuate their domination of a process that is supposed to be accountable to we, the people of the United States.
That's right. That's
And
right.
I would say that I'm asking you if you agree, but like, even if they don't agree with us entirely, like, even if they did agree with us, the squad per se, for example,
Yeah.
our pressure on them, our pressure and presence in the street, pushing a more extreme view than they hold, helps their even moderate view take hold in the Senate. Like, without our pressure on them to do this, they have nothing to point to as far as accountability.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Our allies should welcome the heat because the heat
Right.
creates opportunities in their favor. Now, the only reason they might not, and this, you know, I'll turn the lens back on the person I'm challenging, is because this House Democrats are run by an authoritarian, and she extracts penalties from people for stepping out of line. And so I certainly understand Democrats who are fearful of the ire of the Speaker of the House. That's no reason to squelch or constrain grassroots responses. That's a reason to recognize who might
I mean, it
be-
makes our job more necessary, right? They need
Yes.
us there because, you know, and I say this all the time when people at the beginning were like, well, Biden's not even in office yet. Oh, he's only been there for a day. He's only been there for 50 days. You know, from the
Right.
second that he started running, he had more billionaire donors than anybody else. He's been getting the push from his lobbyists way before any of us ever, or not you, but like showed up,
Yeah.
right? We're
Yeah.
too late. We're already too late. So any pressure that we can put on the squad, it gives them space to say we have to respond to these people or we're not going to win. Of course, I don't think the establishment cares if they win again. They're going to go all in for Chantel or whoever the hell. But like, we are helping the squad make their case to the Nancy Pelosi's.
Yes, and I would say ultimately, in my mind, the critical, I don't want to say insinuation, and I don't want to even reduce it to one, because mobilization begets lots of things, not just expressive value in the news cycle, but people connect, people get inspired, they learn things. Lots of things come out of these mobilizations in any context. But when I look specifically at Medicare for All, I think of the value of these marches in large part in laying the groundwork for primary challengers to entrench Democratic incumbents around the country who are not on board with the bipartisan consensus shared across not just this country, but the entire industrialized world. And if we don't have Democrats who are willing to allow basic human rights for Americans, maybe we should choose different Democrats. And I think of the marches ultimately as preparing the landscape, not just in an electoral sense, because this is meta-electoral, right? As part of its public education, part of it's expanding people's imagination, part of it is helping people overcome their own resignation to whatever inadequate alternative they've settled for and been told is the best that we can accept or expect. Yeah. And ultimately, I think those are each critical steps that we have to get over. But I do think that the marches in microcosm, and for the participants, every microcosm matters. It is moving us forward, and if only for the opportunity, frankly, to have this debate. If we are going to inevitably, in any number of moments going forward, fight this tension between stasis, the inertia of whatever is, and the challenge of initiating and creating new space. We faced this when early in the marriage equality movement. I had the honor and privilege of representing Jason West. He was the Green Party elected mayor of New Paltz, New York. This was 2004. Second case in the country establishing the freedom to marry for anyone. And there were not Democrats supporting us at the time. This was not popular. I didn't do that work because it was popular. I did that work because it needed to happen. And ultimately, it was interesting to me to see how few Democrats were with us. It was not a Democratic Party supported position. No, we were way out in front, and we won. We didn't win the battle, but we won the war. In fact, I dare say that that's one of the few bright spots in the last generation in terms of an expansion of civil rights that hadn't been established before. But the principle I draw out from that is the value of assertion, to initiate, even in the face of perceived obstacles. It creates opportunities. Every day I hear from somebody who says something to me like, "Oh, I didn't know X, Y, or Z until I learned it from you." And for me, that's very humbling because, I acknowledge and I appreciate the part of running for office that is kind of educational, and there was a time in my life when I thought about teaching as a profession, but like to hear that back, that we are actually helping inform people and expand their own thinking. Or every time somebody said to me, like, this is one of my proudest moments on the campaign last year was in the middle of a labor rally. Well, it was cafeteria workers who were being organized from contractors to Facebook and other tech companies, and Unite Here was organizing those workers and getting them unionized. And so we're marching, we're chanting, and a young tech worker, volunteer on our campaign, turns to me and says, "This is really exciting. I've never been in a picket line." And I almost jumped out of my shoes. It was like the best thing I'd heard, Still, it lights me up to this day, because if we're activating people and bringing them to those spaces that they've never been in and into conversations that they've never had, I'm doing my job. Because, I stand on the shoulders of people who've come before, and, the future stands on the shoulders of us in the present and what we do today. So I'm committed to that long-term project of guarding the future, ultimately.
And reminding people what a democracy is, right? Like, I think a lot of people have sort of given up on the idea that their government is representative. And it's like, oh, just trust them. They're off doing a thing. But our government is not representative. As you said, there's a broad swath of our country, Republican, Democrat, Independent, who want Medicare for All and a Green New Deal. And we're not getting it. We don't actually even need to convince the people anymore. The people agree. It's the representatives who are working for the lobbying companies. So why are you doing LA, which is where I am? I'm so excited to come see you on Saturday, and not San Francisco? Or is there is one in San Francisco, right?
Yeah, there's a march here at SF, and we'll have volunteers representing the campaign there. I'm going to LA just to support. California. Say again?
You feel like just coming down to Southern California?
Any excuse. No, I love me some Los Angeles, but it was mostly to support the organizers. And I'm eager to do that. If that's where I can be most helpful, I'm happy to do it. The other thing I just say, on the theme you were raising is, like, we, not on the LA SF piece, but, the sort of preceding part, I think we have a really profound moment today where not just is, in the Medicare for All context, the pandemic forcing a recognition of the untenability of the for-profit predatory system, but similarly in the context of the Green New Deal, where, to be fair, I don't think we have necessarily the same bipartisan majority on the Green New Deal that we do on Medicare for All. But I frankly think that nature is making the case for us with increasing force with every passing day. And, the fact that it takes a pandemic for us to acknowledge what has long been apparent for other countries, or that it takes an entire state being on fire while others are drowning, at the same time, to get us to acknowledge what is simply basic common sense acknowledged by indigenous communities for any number of generations, that we should think about the future before we prey on it. That's not rocket science. But tell anybody in Congress that. And I want to link all this back to one of the roots of the problem, and that is money in politics, and not just money in campaign finance, but I mean money in the pockets of politicians. That's one of the problems here. Nancy Pelosi is the seventh wealthiest member of Congress, and she has a vast and expansive portfolio of assets that include any number of stocks. And I wonder how much millionaires in Congress prioritize the public interest over the fortunes of their families. And every time you see Nancy Pelosi and her husband engaging in one or another or yet another insider trading scandal, and just to be clear, these include stocks including Visa, Tesla, Google, Alphabet. I could go on. This is open corruption.
Yeah.
And it is completely intolerable. And it amazes me that it goes down in plain sight. That these aren't even the objects of secrecy. People report on this stuff.
Yeah.
And yet.
Yes, queen. Yes, queen.
Well, the problem is the mainstream media, which sounds like some tin hat thing every time I say that, but the press that most people watch who are making decisions to vote doesn't inform them of any of this at the end of the day. And that's right. The more independent media you have, the better we are. But 2020 showed us how far behind we are. Yeah. Even when Bernie had such a huge lead, in a matter of days, they could flip the switch and defeat us. And so, that's the problem. So I think one of the only ways we have left until we grow the media more is to get in the streets and raise some frickin' hell. I mean, protest, shut things down, affect the economy. Yeah. The economy is the number one thing we need to hit. But I mean,
yes,
for anyone to come out against a Medicare for All march, to me, is absolutely disgusting. If it's not to your standards, fine. But you can't look at the Medicare for All march and think this is going to hurt our cause. This is a public awareness thing. The people attending it, most of them don't know any of the situation, the backstory. They're just going to see people out in the street who are fighting for Medicare for All. They're going to say, well, why are they doing that? What is it about? And tune in.
And why aren't our representatives listening to the people?
Right. And anyone there is going to get credit for, thank God you're here fighting for us. So that, there might be some why aren't you here questions, but I don't want to focus on that. I'd rather focus on, look at that guy. That guy's fighting for us. He's fighting for Medicare for All.
Well, and I think the why aren't you here questions are ones that we internally should be asking our movement. I know a lot of people who haven't been here, so to speak. Like when I was challenging the Speaker of the House on these issues, it was striking to me to see what organizations just did not show up. What organizations raise a lot of money off supposed commitments to issues that they just abandoned in the most, frankly, important congressional race in the country. And I could go on because, frankly, that was true of every organization, just to be clear. And, I do think that organizations make their calculuses. Power plays a role in these questions. And I'm not interested in that. I'm a principled actor. That's kind of why I've done what I've done in the past. It's why I'm running now. People who care about principles, I'm eager for them to come along. And the ones who don't, ultimately we have to build the power to overcome them. And that's part of what we're talking about here is the stasis within the party of power holders who are unwilling to stake their political capital on these urgent needs before, and I just to be clear, I would like to, I know a lot of the critique centers on what the squad does. I just want to bring it back to Pelosi, because what the squad does, frankly, doesn't even matter that much as long as Nancy Pelosi holds the gavel. And that's who we should be holding accountable. I've seen so many people over the last 9 months or so throw their hands up in the air and be like, oh, electoral politics is hopeless because the squad won't force a vote. And I'm like, first of all, just pay a minute of attention to understand what is happening here. The squad is under a bus, and it is obviously clear who is driving it. And to blame the people under a bus for the direction that the bus is moving in really just does not make any sense at all. And there are things at the discrete margin that members of the squad could do differently, and I could conceivably deconstruct that, but I'm not so interested in that because I know that the impediment to the policy is not any of them. The impediment to the policy is the Speaker of the House. And, people can come up with a lot of different strategies to how to deal with Pelosi. And in December. A lot of people were very eager to, force the vote and that whole process. And everybody in that moment I would describe as a day late and a dollar short, because the moment in her career when she was maximally accountable was November 2020, when I was fending off this character assassination that sent her back to Washington. And, if she were to debate anyone, which she has not done since 1987,
that's criminal, actually.
That's the most disgusting thing about politics to me, is that anyone should ever win an election without debating.
Or going without a reporter asking them why. I expect a powerful incumbent to do it if she can get away with it. But how does she get away with it is the question I have. We have a free press, supposedly, right? It's not state-controlled media.
Come on.
Right?
Are you really asking that question?
Right? I mean, I'd love somebody to prove me wrong, but when you don't have the independent press asking powerful politicians, why won't you debate, and why haven't you since most of your voters were born?
Yeah.
Well,
it
should be untenable because
please.
As Democrats, we make that argument against Republicans that don't debate. So it should be untenable within our own party.
Right.
The same value should transfer to our own party. It's not that.
There's some basic principles of democracy that we're not upholding, and nobody seems to care when your side is winning. It's just, it's like we're through the looking glass. I mean, I feel like I'm constantly knocking my head against a wall, but I'm looking at the time, and we've had you for so much, and I'm so grateful. And you always put things, I've been listening to you and following you for such a long time. And please, about 20 minutes ago, I blanked out a little bit because I felt bad about the way I asked a question. And I hope you know that I was not on any level.
It's all good, sister. Don't worry about it.
I just knew that you would be able to describe and combat some of the bad faith attacks that I feel sometimes get floated out there in a way that I'm just not able to do. So thank you for bearing with me. We're so happy and grateful that you came on our show. I'm so looking forward to seeing you on Saturday. I will be there.
I look forward to meeting you in person, and I'm grateful for the forum tonight. Thanks for bringing me on.
Thank you.
And keep up the great work. We're all in this together, and I'll be eager to join you in the future. Keep up the great work.
Have you back, because I didn't even get to ask you about trying to shut down people on Facebook and free speech there, and how that's different from there's so many questions I want to pick your brain on. So we will definitely come asking you to come back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I hope you have an amazing speech set for Saturday. And I appreciate everything you're doing. Good luck, brother.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Appreciate it. All the best to you. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Cheers.
Peace.
Bye. That was awesome. I'm embarrassed that I asked the question the way I did. Are we still live?
Oh yeah, we are live.
Yeah.
Did we finish our segment, or where are we at?
I think we did. I think everybody's off for dinner. We're done. You know what I also realized? I was supposed to do a whole chat thing. People were talking, and I didn't even open up my chat menu. There's been a lot going on, friends, family. I'm so sorry. Thank you all. I didn't even. We were wearing too many hats today, so I'm embarrassed and I'm sorry. I'm going to read through everybody's texts and chat.
I mean, all we had to do left was to discuss the Tucker Carlson show, which nobody wants to hear about. God damn it!
For God's sakes!
Let's just summarize it. It was terrible. He basically used identity politics and culture war stuff like they always do. But
did you want to on that one clip that you had that's pretty funny, and it
we can show the clip. Yeah. So I mean, the thing about all the people about Tucker and his Schultz show is he presents culture war stuff that his side agrees with. We don't agree with, but it's not debatable. It's kind of like you either agree or you don't. Like pregnant man emojis was the thing. Pregnant man emojis.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Like this is some important thing that emojis now have pregnant men, and that's a crisis. So anyway, we're never going to agree on that. That's fine, but it's not some news show. It's not controversial. It's not important. So he wins his audience over with that stuff, and then presents maybe one or two things that are like right wing sort of Trumpy things that are really hard, like stuff.
Oh, there's a whole thing about Prince Harry and Meghan and how they're so privileged, but they feel like they've been canceled, and isn't that so hypocritical? And illegal immigration. It was like all the best.
They made the case that Biden is basically flooding the state with Democrats. It's the great replacement theory, but the idea that Biden was human trafficking in immigrants. So they don't, as an immigrant, you're not going to vote. I mean, if you're undocumented, like you're not going to bring in like 50,000 from Mexico or Guatemala or any place, and suddenly
he's awful. What makes him dangerous is that he speaks well and he has a few good points, right? And so it feels just rational enough that if you are susceptible to that, you might.
Yeah, I think it's just rational enough that if the culture war stuff that you agreed with, which he sets up with,
right?
He sets you up with Prince Harry, married to a black person, and that's sort of problematic. That's the subtext, is that that's problematic. They left the royal family and they're here, but they're pretending they're not rich, but they're living in the richest part of LA. So, it's this culture war nonsense that gets you to accept their opinion. Because if you believe any of that stuff and you already believe that, you're going to go, okay, he's telling you the truth about stuff. So anyway, the one thing that we all agreed on was this segment that he showed, which we are going to show. I challenge you.
I'm seeing people write, and because of this platform, which we are leaving next week, I am not allowed to respond to anybody. So I just want to quickly tell Motown 3001, I am drinking Noble Vine 667. I know you asked. The other thing, just before we get to this, because I don't want to forget, we pulled a lot of, there was a thread that was written by, I wrote it down, Drew Holden, 360, who actually, I really love his threads. And he was the one who had compiled all of the skepticism on the Democratic side before the election. So I just want to give props to him because it was all like in a nice place. So, okay, now I'm going to just drink my wine and we're going to go out on this guy railing.
Yeah, no worries. And thank you people in chat. I appreciate it a ton. We're just figuring out all the back and forth on these different platforms, but next week we have it dialed in. We're going to be on StreamYard, but from your perspective, you won't even notice difference other than things will be a little smoother is the only thing. But so here's the one segment they showed on Tucker Carlson that we could all agree with, I would think, because
hilarious.
Yeah, here is a critique of Brian Seltzer, which is not wrong.
He has spent most of his administration seeing people on television and immediately calling them.
But maybe that's how it works sometimes.
I don't want you to think.
Is that how it works? That's how you get access.
But I don't want you to think that what I said at that point was in any way inauthentic. I think the media has done a terrible job on this. I think you yourself, you're a nice guy. You're full of sanctimony. You become part of one of the parts of the problem of the media. You come on here and you have a monopoly on truth. You exactly how things are supposed to be done. You are one of the reasons people can't stand the media. Sorry.
I love that. You're cracking me up.
It's your fault.
Cracking me up too.
So what should I do differently, Michael?
Don't talk so much. Listen more. People have genuine problems with the media. The media doesn't get the story right. The media exists in its own bubble.
That's true. I agree.
You got to stop. I mean, that last segment that I just had to listen to of all of the people saying the same old stuff. Also, you're incredibly repetitive. It's week after week. I mean, you're the flip side of Donald Trump. Fake news, and you say virtuous news. There's
we just figure out what is
here.
real.
I mean,
I'm listening.
Well, figuring out what is real is not so easy, and most people don't want to turn to Brian Stelter to tell us what's real. I'm sorry.
Well, then why'd you bother coming on CNN a few times this week?
I love this.
I'm a book salesman.
I'm selling some shit.
Michael, I love talking to you. I'm grateful you came on, and I guess let's do it again in 4 years. Thanks.
Yeah.
I love that into it. Let's do it again in 4 years. Like I
Yeah.
won't be seeing you for a long ass time.
I mean, they're all going to be in the Hamptons together this weekend, just the way, Trump's granddaughter and Biden's granddaughter were in the Hamptons last weekend that we saw pictures of. These guys are all, just as much as I enjoyed his takedown of Brian Stelter or whatever the hell, Michael Wolff is no prize. Like, but it was just hilarious to see that happening, like right to his face. So that and so one good thing.
We forgot our one good thing. Well, we had Shahid on, so that was our one good thing. But yeah, so Seltzer is basically he is CNN. What's the guy's name?
Zucker.
Jeff Zucker. So Jeff Zucker and CNN. Tucker Carlson did call out that Seltzer's viewpoints are he's sort of the hit dog, the attack dog for Zucker, which is accurate. And
it's all accurate.
So
it's just happened. I mean, there's just never any self-awareness, or they know, but they're just never gonna. It's all hypocritical. But yes, CNN, Fox. I mean, Fox is especially pernicious. But also, one of the things that's really upsetting about CNN and MSNBC is the people, just like for Fox viewers, but the people who watch CNN and MSNBC, they think they're getting the real news. So we're just royally effed. Have another drink.
Is that our out?
That's our out. That's our one good thing. You guys you're fucked. You're on your own. No, we're so happy you guys are here. Thank you. This was a long live show, and we had lots of technical issues. So
apology. Part of it was Shahid. We planned for him a half an hour in, so we kind of filled some time until he got here. But anyway, next
throw Shahid under the bus. Shahid,
no,
it was a great show, but
this was perfect until Shahid came on. I mean, I kind of feel like he was a mess. He wasn't even. He was sober.
Say I know. I kept drinking through everything he was saying, so I realized I'm just not eloquent like that. And this was quite a day of technological stuff that we were dealing with, and I really felt a little unprepared. So I was drinking through it, and then just like my eyes a little bit rolled back, where I thought, how am I I don't even have the words that I need to enter this conversation. So thanks to all of you who powered through it with me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Shahid, for coming. And thank you for everybody for listening. We'll be on live next week, Wednesday at 4, at 5.
Difficulties. 5 o'clock.
Guaranteed 0 technical problems.
Or Pat owes you
money.
Anyone
believe that? No. Anyway, cheers, guys.
Cheers. Have a